Hello friends. In previous lecture we have seen how to set up Maven. In this lecture I'm going to pull code which we have pushed into the GitHub and we'll start building on Linux system. For that one I'm just logging into my GitHub repository. This is my GitHub repository. I'm just going inside repositories, first demo project, and get the link of this repository, and we need to go onto Linux system. First, let me check whether Git is installed over here or not. If I execute a command called Git, what happened? Let me open new duplicate session, clear the screen and increase the font size. Yes, if I execute Git, okay, it is not installed yet. Yum install Git, yes to install. Now Git is installed. Let me clear the screen again. Now Git clone we need to do, right? Git clone the repository name which we would like to copy. Alright, we have downloaded the repository onto our local system. Now let's go to our repository and ls. You can see pom.xml src. Here we need to execute our Maven commands. So the first Maven command what we are executing is mvn and the goal name what we would like to execute. Again I am going back to Maven goals and we'll see what and all goals we can execute. This is Maven goals page. So here we can execute validate, compile, test, package, install, and deploy we cannot able to do because we should have proper authentication for the remote repository. So let's go and first execute the validate, and you can see this build is successful. And if I do ls, okay, so far there is no target directory has been created. Usually whenever we were executing on Eclipse, we could see the target directory always appears. But here you can clearly see the variation. Until unless we execute at least compile, we cannot able to see the target directory. Now let's execute the compile. So mvn is the command to execute the Maven commands and compile. And we are compiling our code. Whenever we compile, it should create the jar files. And observe this, it is pulling all the required packages from the remote repository to our local repository. Okay, I mean to say central repository to our local repository. It took almost 45 seconds to complete this one, and this is the first time we have executed this compile command. That's the reason it pulled a lot of packages which are necessary to build this application, and it stores in the local repository. I will show you the local repository in a while, but build is successful. And if I do ls again, now you can see the target directory over here. Target directory gets created whenever we do at least a compile command. So if I go inside to a target directory, and you can see the class files. Okay, so if you do remember, we were discussing about this. Initial step is we need to compile the code. So whenever we compile the code, Java file get converted into the class file, right? So that is what we are going to see. First demo project, okay, and app.class, you can see this one. All right, and we haven't compiled the test cases yet. That's the reason you cannot able to see the test cases information. Okay, now I'm going to compile the test cases. So before going to that one, cd tilde and first Maven project, and make sure that you are executing this where you have the pom.xml. So if you execute the command from other location, it doesn't work. Let's take that. If I go to src and the mvn compile, if I do, it search for pom.xml, and if it couldn't able to find it, it throw you the build failure. And you can see that the goal you specified required a project to execute, but there is no pom.xml in the directory. Okay, so I'm going back to again where we have located our pom.xml, and this time I'm going to execute mvn test compile. Whenever we execute mvn test compile, along with the source code, it also compiles the test cases. We have one test case in src, right? Okay, so it is going to compile that as well. And this time it is not going to pull the lot of packages because most of the packages are available. So our build also quite quicker. Why? Because it is going to pull the required packages from the local repository, not from the central repository. And we have done the test compile only the packages which are required additionally. It is going to pull remaining all it takes from the local repository. All right, now again if I go to my target, I could able to see the test cases. Yes, you can see here If I do the tree on this one, tree is a command which will displace the all the content of that particular directory. Okay, let me try it. Okay, tree is not installed. Let me install. And if I do again tree test class, and you can see there is a test class com demo company. Under that app test.class, this is the file has been created. All right, next thing is we have compiled our source code and test cases. Now it's time to execute the test cases. For that we can use the Maven goal. That is, I'm going back to again our home directory of the remote repository. Now mvn test. Okay, so it is going to test the our source code. And while doing every new goal, if it requires the additional packages, it is going to pull the all the packages from the central repository. Okay, we have tested, we have only one test case, so the one test case has been run and it is successful. That's the reason build also successful. And so far if you observe, we haven't created any jar file because we are just doing only the compile and test. We yet to do the packaging. So if I go to goals, here we have compiled, test, compile, even test we have ran, and package. So now we are going to do the package command. So mvn package, and again if it requires some packages, it is going to pull it and it execute the all the phases. Then it is going to make it as a package. By default it is a jar file. Now it has created a jar file and it's stored in this location. Okay, so this is how we can package our code. Our next goal is install. So let's execute install. Whenever we do install, it is going to store in our local repository. Before executing install, let's look for the where is our local repository. So I will go back over here and search for find slash minus name dot m2. So dot m2 is the local repository directory. So let's search for, and you can see here slash root m2. Under root directory there is a directory called m2. Why it's created under root? Because I'm a root user. As a root user I'm doing all this activity. Usually that m2 directory gets created under the user who is executing or who is configured it. Usually .m2 directory gets created under the user's home directory. Currently I have logged in as a root user. That's the reason it is created under slash root. Okay, anyway I'm going back to my root directory. If I do pwd, you can see root, and if I go to .m2, and if you want to see the hidden files, ls-a, and you can see the directory called .m2 is there. If I go inside and if I do ls, so repository, and if I do tree, you can see lot of packages you can see over here. Okay, it has been displayed in the tree format. Why? Because multiple directories are there. In each directory different files or libraries are there. Okay, it's too big output, but if I do ls, again repository is there. If I go inside repository, and there are multiple, again we have different folders. We majorly concentrate on com. If I go inside com, you can see we don't have demo company yet. Why? Because we haven't executed install command. Okay, so now again I'm switching back to my root directory. Okay, pwd, I'm under root. Here we have the first demo project. If I go inside, again I'm going to execute mvn install. Okay, whenever we execute mvn install, now packages should copied into the com location, and you can see a new company called demo company. Let's execute the mvn install command. So we are using the install goal over here. Alright, build is successful, and you can see it took only 9 seconds. Why? Because most of the required packages are already there. And if I go from the starting of this build, you can see here mvn install. Whenever I execute, it is building the project. The project name is com demo company and the first demo project, and it is pulling some of the required packages. And first it is doing the default resources and the default compile, default test resources, and a default test compile, and a default test it has done. Once test is done, default packaging is done. At last it is doing the default install. Okay, which means that it has copied the packages into the .m2 directory. If you see here installing, this is the jar file. This jar file copied into slash root m2. And again if I go back to my root directory ls-la, go to .m2, and if I look for repositories and com, Here you can see demo company. Earlier it was not there. Once you do the install, it get copied into this location. This is how Maven goals works. But in this case, we are just pulling the code and created or executed Maven commands. All right. So this is how we can take the code of a developer and build it in the build server. That's all for this lecture. See you in the next one.